Time is thought to be linear, but linear histories often omit narratives that don't fit neatly into the idea of A then B. Helga Crane, from Nella Larsen's Quicksand, embodies a synectical framework for the diaspora itself. She represents many different Black identities, living vastly disparate experiences, all characterized by the recurring need to seek out a sanctuary and tied together by the process of movement. Along with Richard Wright's 12 Million Black Voices and the narratives of expats like Josephine Baker and James Baldwin, a pattern emerges. One of Blacks being marginalized and seeking spiritual asylum elsewhere. This recurring narrative seems to correspond to a sense of displacement violently imbued by the Middle Passage of the Atlantic slave trade. Jenny Sharp points out that diaspora writers often deploy the Middle Passage as a metaphor for the psychological state of homelessness associated with migrancy. But this linear narrative can be problematic. Sandra Jackson implores readers to examine the experiences of African descendant populations beyond the Middle Passage framework, for greater insight into Black experiences which are not rooted in nor framed in slavery, but instead address issues of migration. It's important to note that many wanderers in the diaspora weren't looking for a Black paradise, but in actuality a place where race went unrecognized. In traveling to Denmark, Helga feels like a released bird in her returned feeling of happiness and freedom, that blessed sense of belonging to herself alone and not to a race. Eddie Chambers concurs, adding, many of these artists presupposed or imagined that they were part of a cosmopolitan, metropolitan world in which seemingly blunt labels of ethnic or racial difference had no substantial place. These cross-continental movements have often been fueled by a colorblind self-actualization. Charles Martin says about Quicksand, it helps us see that Helga Crane runs mostly from the imposed need to particularize the way that she refers to herself. In her failure to find a place of happiness in Europe, the novel shows that there are no colorless places. Rachel Waldoff discusses the goal of this movement and her concept of a culture of ownership, in which residents who intend to live in a neighborhood for years to come are more likely to have a stake in community life and be invested in its future. The diaspora, much like Helga Crane, has always been about different lives and narratives seeking a home. Amy Ungiri says, it is a continuous process of location and relocation, a complex series of negotiations which assert and reassert the foundational importance of freedom, rebuke the poverty of despair, and recognize the intensity of longing as the inevitable component in dreaming a better world. From the fields of the South to the suburbs of the North and across the pond and back again, and exemplified by Helga Crane. In many diaspora writings, we find the concept of exodus, of a people not trying to invade somebody else's land, but finding a place where they can also belong.